now. Welcome everybody to another Shelfie. I'm Kirsten Luckens. I am coordinator for Crossing the T's Book Festival, and I'm here with Annie Garthwaite, and we're going to hear from Annie from her book Cecily. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this author. She grew up in a working class community in the northeast of England. A schoolgirl interest in medieval history became a lifelong obsession with Cecily Neville. So at age 55, she enrolled on the Warwick Writing MA programme. That's a brave thing to do. And her extraordinary debut novel, Cecily, is the result of that MA. So Annie had a 30-year international business career where she found herself quite frequently the only woman at the table. And she gained valuable insights into how a woman like Cecily might have operated. So today she lives with her partner and far too many animals, she says, on the side of a green Shropshire hill close to the Yorkist stronghold of Ludlow. Now, what will become apparent is the significance of Yorkist strongholds, because Cecily, well now, 1431 is a dangerous time for a woman to be defiant. England has been fighting France for 100 years. At home, power-hungry men within a corrupt government manipulate a weak king and name Cecily's husband, York's loyal duke, an enemy. As the king's grasp on sanity weakens, plots to destroy York take root. It will take all of Cecily's courage and cunning to save her family. But when the will to survive becomes ambition for the crown, will she risk treason to secure it? Told through the eyes of its greatest unseen protagonist, this astonishing debut book plunges you into the blood and exhilaration of the first days of the Wars of the Roses. This is war as women fight it. Amazing bit of blurb, isn't that great? Whoa, that really gets you going. So we're in the War of the Roses with Cecily Neville, the great matriarch of the House of York. And I'm going to hand over to Annie, who's going to read us a section from that book. But tell us, Annie, where are we in the narrative?
We are right at the very beginning. So the book opens in 1431 when Cecily is 16 years old. And, in so many ways, this is a book about how women exercise power in a world where men have all the power cards. And Cecily absolutely does that. But it's also a book about how dangerous it is for women to exercise power in a man's world. And so when I was thinking about where to start the novel, 1431 seemed the perfect place, because when she was 16 years old, Cecily went with her young new husband to France, ostensibly to witness the crowning of Henry VI of England as King of France, and certainly she saw that. But at the same time, or much the same time, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. And in my research, I realized that Cecily was almost certainly present for that event. And I thought, well, if this is a book about women attempting to exercise power and how dangerous that can be, what better place to start than with Joan? So it's 1431, it's the 30th of May, and we're in Rouen in France. It's no easy thing to watch a woman burn, a young woman who has seen only 3 more summers than yourself and claims the voice of God compels her actions. But there it is, the day's work, and she must harden herself to it. So on a May morning so fine, its early sun has already chased Rouen's street dogs into shadows, Cecily has put on black velvet, sombre and rich. She has bound a rosary at her waist, a reminder to the French that God has answered the prayers of the English and delivered Joan of Arc into their hands, a reminder to her king that her loyalty is to him and to heaven. She waits now in the market square, her face to the pyre, sullen French anger at her back, for the signal that will tell her that Joan is coming out to die. She raises her head when it comes, a trumpet call high and vicious, and beneath it the crowd's murmur growing to a roar. Beside her, her husband Richard straightens his back, squares his feet. She swallows bile and does the same. The sun is hot enough, but that's nothing, she thinks, to the blaze to come. Have courage, her mother would say. Faith and courage can accomplish anything. Cecily wonders if Joan's mother told her the same. Likely someone did. In her glory days, Joan put on armour and rode at the head of armies. With words alone, she roused a fearful king and turned the tide of a war. Imagine. Now the tide runs all against her, and she must find only the courage to die. And though Joan is England's enemy, Cecily wishes courage for her now. Soon the ring of metalled feet overwhelms the clarion, and the crowd parts for a wagon, its blade bristling guard, and the prisoner bound upon it. It's the first time she's seen Joan, and she isn't sure what to expect. Just a pale, thin girl, it seems, head shorn and bloodied. It doesn't look like there's much fight left in her. The bright armour of Joan's soldiering days is long gone, and today's thin shift, with the filth of a prisonnier upon it, is scant covering for a body that, some say, English soldiers have been allowed their way with. Though Richard says, surely not, Cecily can believe it. The king's uncles have long wanted Joan dead, but they wanted her shamed first. Cecily sees Joan stumble as she's pulled from the wagon and thinks for a moment she'll fall and knock herself senseless, and what then? But the guards press in to hold Joan upright, her body crushed between their bulk as they jostle towards the pyre, her arms pinioned behind her, her small breasts jutting. The desperate parade passes close enough that Cecily can see Joan's eyes. One is closed by livid bruises. The other, white-rimmed and wide, is fixed on the crucifix borne high above her by a priest, leading the way to death and whatever might lie beyond that. Joan's lips are moving, and Cecily recognises the words of the Ave falling, stuttering and fast. She wonders what she prays for. Rescue? Or just an end to this? I would pray for the death of every Englishman here, Cecily thinks. Then suddenly she's afraid, for no one knows the power of Joan's prayers, and Richard stands beside her, who has seen Joan tried and nodded his head at her sentence. Her breath catches and she pants once, and he's holding out a hand to steady her. She raises a palm, shakes her head to signal no, then makes a fist to hide her fingers trembling. He draws back, and she feels his gaze follow hers to where the guards are handing Joan into the reaching arms of the men who wait to receive her. They draw her up, bare legs flailing, then bind her and bring more wood, so that she stands deep in a thicket of sieves. She can no longer hear Joan's prayers, so out of pity and to guard her own soul, she speaks them with her as the men clamber down and reach for their torches. At last the fire is set, and the flames lick like dogs at Joan's feet and thighs. Cecily feels their growing heat against her own cheek as Joan's voice, steady at the last, rings out above her head. All I have done was by God's order. Then urgent as the priest's arms falter and his burden dips, hold up the cross of Christ that I may see it as I die. Cecily narrows her eyes against livid sparks as Joan's prayers give way to hacking coughs and shrieks and sudden silence. She sets herself to watch as flesh burns, blossoms, and falls away. There's grit in her eyes. Sweat runs the cleft of her shoulder blades, and beneath her clasped hands, her stomach shrivels. But she won't flinch. This is a test. Oh, Joan!
Poor Joan. Wow, what an amazing opening. So strong. Yeah, I was absolutely transported. Thank you.
Thank
For
you.
that. The last thing I have to ask you is what your recommendation is from your shelf, because this is a shelfie. So which book would you like to bring to our attention?
Well, I thought I'd recommend a book by another good Northern woman. And yes, and it's another debut, and it's by a woman called Tricia Cresswell, who comes from Annick. And like me, she took to writing later in life, you know, after she'd retired. And her book is called The Midwife. It's historical fiction. It's set in the 1840s. And I was just blown away by it. It's got two sort of storylines that run parallel to each other. And one is about a midwife working in Annick. And the other is about a male midwife, or accouchée, as they used to call them then, working in London. And they both have, each of these characters have a sort of unknown or secret past. And you don't know quite what it is with either of them, where they've come from. And you know that at some point their two storylines are going to inevitably collide, but you just can't work out, you can't guess how. And then when they do, it's just such an unexpected surprise. So, oh my God. And then it's got a wonderful sort of denouement. It's amazing, I think. And, you know, from a writerly point of view, it's just so beautifully plotted. You know, these two storylines progressing and the tension that she manages to maintain. And her characters are just so convincing. I listened to it on audiobook while I was driving around, and I don't know how I didn't crash the car, because I was just so engrossed in this story. So I really recommend it to everyone. Tricia Cresswell, The Midwife.
Thank you so much. Great recommendation. And links to the books will be available and via our official festival bookseller, Drake the Bookshop. So thank you so much for your time, Annie.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a complete pleasure. Have a lovely weekend.
You too.